Okay, it is 4:31 on Thursday, July 11th, 2019. Board of Commissioners meeting on a work study, affiliation work study. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Whitcott at this time.
Did you want to do a roll call?
Oh, yes, I do need to do a roll call. Val, please.
President Norris.
Here.
Vice President Herron.
Here.
Secretary Spikers.
Missing in
As
action.
conducted.
AWOL.
Commissioner Pollard.
Here.
Commissioner Carter.
Here.
Thank you.
Now it's your turn, Dr.
All
Whitcott.
right. Well, let's jump back in. So I brought back some of the slides that we looked at last time, again, just to kind of keep us regularly seeing them and just opportunities to make sure that we remain aligned. And then if there's any opportunities that we need to edit any of them as we've gone along the way. So this was the proposed structure slide. So there's been nothing in substance that's happened that would change this. So again, this is just to, again, reorient us all. And just the 4 bullet points that came out of the RFP. And when we looked at this last month, I know it was just my intention was just to bring the information back out of the RFP and some of the sub-points beneath that I think we're kind of creating, and Mr. Pollard, you had a fair number of questions about them, about the sub-points, and the sub-points were intended to be for examples. And so I thought maybe it's just best to take the sub-points out, and then each time we would just look at the 4 reasons. I know when I'm in conversations with people, you know, a variety of conversation, and they hear that we're working on this transaction, they'll ask the question, why? And so it helps me to have the 4 answers that I can give to them. So my intention is to arm you with the answers, because I'm certain you're getting asked the same questions as well as you're out. And then I just grabbed some bullet points from our last month's conversation. Again, just knowing, and Steve and I were talking about this morning, and just knowing that the weeks and months that are ahead of us as we get deeper and deeper into affiliation and the transactional work, just the volume of work that we're going to be hit with is going to be just more and more and more, and it's going to really feel kind of not tidal wave, but big wave-ish. And so my hope is just to kind of come back and revisit where we've been, just again, for alignment and for edits, and to make sure that we all remain, because it's so important that we all remain kind of together so that we can keep moving forward. So feel free to offer different thoughts on what you feel like that we accomplished last month when we were together. But the key points that I had jotted down around the concept of the trust, the money that's set aside for restricted dollars, that it'll be funded with a portion of unrestricted tax income and a portion of our unrestricted cash. So, and that is just funded from those sources. We still have not gotten to the point of saying how much needs to be in there, but we got to that point. And that the reasons for any potential access other than the dissolution of the transaction, that any reasons for access need to be very clear and have very clear intentions behind them, and then there needs to be a high threshold for accessing them. So some of the conversation around that was there needs to be absolute clarity that there are no other resources for the funds. We need to all be in agreement that it is for a good reason, and it's for a reason that meets all needs. I think that the example that was being used in that piece of the conversation was what if an addition to the building was being considered? And so there would need to have such a really high threshold, clear reasons for purposes. There also the concept that you all will really insist on is the trust is not a resource for maintenance, for routine maintenance. That is what gets taken on in the agreement, in the lease transaction. I think the maintenance comes as part of that. And the ownership or the distribution of the trust in the scenario of a dissolution of the agreement needs to have clarity based on the trigger. So that needs to be, we need to walk into the trust development with some clarity around that.
John, would you make a note that Commissioner Spikers is here?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then the final concept that I had jotted down was there needs to be a process for bilateral consensus, meaning this group as the landlords, as the owners, and then the renters consensus if there's any capital spending and performance thresholds of eligibility in order to accomplish this. So did you all feel like that there was different high order bullet points that we need to make sure we capture in our summary? We have very detailed notes of what was said, but just as a great touch point for us to keep returning to around the trust.
I think trying to recall it a month later is challenging. Maybe when we do these, we can come back to it at the end of this meeting and say, what do you think are the big takeaways?
We can do both. Cool. We can do both. Because my intention is each time we'll just come back and we'll look at, even next month, we'll just look at trust again, because it's just great to
The reminders are
just
great.
really keep it in our
Yeah.
minds. Yep. Yep, absolutely. Anything else that just like, as you think about our conversation last month and we didn't represent here?
Not offhand,
Okay. That's all, that's totally fine. So then, tonight we get to go through our list.
Yes.
So tonight we'll spend actually a fair amount of time on due diligence. And so I'm just gonna leave this slide up there, and as we go through our agenda, and then we'll come back to our timeline slides. So the due diligence, I think Val gave each of you a list of the due diligence. So question, it should be in an individual packet, and it's noted that it is, thank you, Daryl. Just a reminder, all the information in the due diligence is protected under the non-disclosure agreement, and it is extremely important to overlook that we keep that we honor that. So we've marked it as confidential. This is a reminder not to let it pass out of your hands, and it will not be available for public records disclosure until the very end of the transaction is finished. So if you take it, great. If you say, I don't even want to own it, I don't want to have it in my possession, when I walk out the door, just give it back and we'll shut it in there. But two things that we want to accomplish tonight around the due diligence. And I should say, you're not seeing all of it. It was just first round. This is just the first phase of documents that we've been able to go through and be able to give you some feedback on. But two questions. One is, as we're using this form tonight, do you feel like the columns are going to help you in receiving the information? So just hold that in your mind as we're looking at this. And then we'll talk about each individual line that we have information to talk on.
Some of this already have reviewer comments.
So that's exactly what we're bringing to you tonight. So just a reminder, thank you, Emma, because it's a perfect segue to the process here is the information comes onto the shared site. It's a protected shared site. Somebody on our review team has been identified to be the reviewer of those documents. And so they go in, and what you're seeing tonight are, Steve actually was the reviewer of all of them. And so he's gonna walk you through what it was he looked at, why it was on the request list, and what his assessment was, or what he learned as he did the review from his subject matter expert perspective.
I just have a question on the item and description. I kind of get lost in all of that.
Okay.
So I'm wondering who came up with the item descriptions and why?
Who came up with it was a combination of the review team, so Steve, Brian Bauer, who's our affiliation council, and then we had passed it through this group once before as well. It was very early on, so it probably would have been harder to, we weren't as deep as we are now, so we wouldn't have had as many contributions to make as we do right now.
Yeah, because I went back a couple of months, I didn't see.
Yeah, it was it was probably
Was it-
February.
A number of months ago, we developed this.
Okay.
So these map to a request that we made?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay.
these are the requests that we
Got
made.
it.
This is the information we have requested from.
Got it. And it's noted where it's not, where they weren't able to reply yet, or?
No, it's
This
just
is-
noted what we haven't completed, we haven't looked at it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So everything that we've requested has not yet been delivered.
Right.
So, but rather than trying to sit down and go through these multiple pages and multiple documents and trying to get all of that, like your brain soak it all in, because it's coming to us in slow waves, that felt like a more digestible way to present it to you too, was to bring it to you with what we have right now, and then next month, we'll bring the next group will be there. It probably won't take beyond next month to get it all, because we're really pushing to get it in. That's the intention here.
Yeah, but I would doubt all the items will be reviewed by next month, but we will have access to them and be in the process of reviewing.
So you have access right now for some of the documents or
Yes,
all of the
we do.
documents?
Some of the documents.
Those that have comments,
And some more.
the blank ones doesn't have, that means you
So
haven't reviewed them.
what you're seeing is the entirety of what we have asked for,
Uh-huh.
and so we will be going through and just talking about some of them tonight.
Yeah, and where there are comments, someone has reviewed them and made comments.
That's all.
Doesn't mean that the others aren't available, we just, it's more time.
So reviewer comments are up to date in terms of all the comments the reviewers wants to make?
Yes.
Well, it seems like they're kind of lagging behind here a little bit. Because if I recall, we were supposed to have an agreement in place by the end of July or early August.
Not agreement in place, agreement now at the phase of working
Or a
through the
draft
agreement.
agreement
Correct.
by the end of July.
Correct.
Oh, yeah.
By the end of
To
July.
react to it.
Well, we can't do that until we get these. So why are they delaying?
I don't think these have anything to do
Yeah.
with each other. So this is us assessing them as a potential partner.
Mm-hmm.
The document, the definitive agreement document is another step in the process. And yes, we have been talking to them about, we think we should probably be seeing a draft agreement by now. And so those are conversations just today. So
Well, how
they're.
can we even look at a draft agreement before we get and analyze what they have that we've requested? When did we request this stuff?
These requests were submitted May, early part of May, late April, early May.
Probably late April, I would think.
So 6.5 months ago, or 2.5 months ago.
Let's say.
2.5 months ago, they were submitted. That's
Yes.
10 weeks.
So two things, part of the problem was the site, we gave them the request, but the site to put them on and share them wasn't up and ready yet, so there was a slight delay getting that. So it was probably the middle of May, second to third.
Before they actually had access.
Before that site was ready for them to
Yeah,
start.
I mean, all you gotta
rolling
do
it
is
out.
upload, right? Takes part of the day. So I'm a little concerned about them right now and why they're not timely doing things that were supposed to be done maybe a month ago.
Sir, in the due diligence review, it says here.
You might wanna bring that up with them.
So I regularly bring that up with them.
Yeah,
It's
tell
not
them that
being
the board is concerned
So
at
our,
this point.
yeah, and I have to be a little careful
Mhm.
because you have to be careful about, irritating because.
I understand
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So-
And I understand that. I totally understand. It's kind of like I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But I don't want, you know, a draft agreement and then we have a week to think about it and change it or whatever. And my thought is if we don't have a draft agreement by the end of July or maybe the first week, at least by the next meeting, there's gonna be an issue
So
because
the-
of the time constraints that
Yeah.
our council is.
So the way that we've actually framed that question or the response back is our timeline, we all agreed to a timeline. And so the timeline says we should be at a different place than we are right now. So just calling on the agreement for accountability. And also reminding them that they have only three board meetings left this year. So they have to get moving so that they can get it
For their
prepared
fiscal year, is that what
process.
you're referring
No,
to?
for the
For
year,
the
because they
year.
meet every other month.
They meet every
Oh,
other
I
month. That's an
see.
important
Oh.
factor.
Right, so
Mm-hmm.
reminding them that actually that the impetus and needs to be coming from their side because they're the ones with limited access and limited time opportunities.
When is our next board meeting, August or July?
No, I'm working backwards, so November, September, August.
When,
No, July.
July,
We should
thank
have
you.
one shortly.
when you put this together, because right there in the affiliation class, the diligence review, was overlay involved in the time frame? Is right here, it says July 15th. Are they
Which one
aware?
are you looking at?
This is from the, you know, this is the one that, right there.
That's-
And right here, it says July 15. Were they involved in the process of putting the time frame there,
So
the timeline? Because I'm just
that
curious
is-
to see.
That is dated, what
Yeah.
you're referring to.
It's
that-
July.
No.
It's about,
What
No,
is,
that you're looking at, that slide deck.
This
that's-
one.
That, no,
This one, yeah,
that
yeah.
slide deck, is pretty dated, so I wouldn't use that. I would
Or-
use this timeline.
what is our
This is the one that
council?
we've all agreed to.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying, I just wanted to
Yeah, yeah,
clarify.
okay.
This
Okay.
is the timeline that
Yeah.
Overlake and us have agreed to.
oh, okay, so
Yeah,
this
so
was not,
They were.
they were not involved then?
They were, yes, they were involved, but there's been more information that's been learned in the meantime, so I think that was premature to put that detail on it. So I would use this, that we post every month as your reference point rather than that.
No, that was highlighted, the other ones, but that's okay.
Sorry,
What,
David.
what does our council think about the delays? Does he think there's a problem or an issue with them about what they want to be doing and how they're going to, I mean, is it going to affect the way we enter into any kind of an agreement?
No, part of the delay we do know is because they have been spending a lot of time looking at our financials and trying to understand them because the financials this year look different than they did last year. And because our trajectory has not been great in these first 6 months.
Mhm.
So that's causing them, because when I asked them, I said, is it causing you to pause, like
Mhm.
when we're moving forward? And the answers that I've been given is, no, it doesn't change our intention, but what it does do is cause us to stop to try and understand. So that they,
Well, that's what I'm concerned about. That's what I've been concerned about in the finance meeting
Right.
for the last
Right.
4 months.
right, which is why we've been spending a lot of time helping them to understand. We hosted a big group out here 2 weeks ago. Hosted a big group out here so that they can come and learn and understand about the swing bed process. Got feedback on that today, that they thoroughly enjoyed it. They really felt like that we catapulted them quite a ways from where they walked in the door to when they walked out the door. So there's not been a drop off in enthusiasm.
Okay, well, that's
Just
kind
a
of
s-
what
Right,
we're-
just a slow in production and adherence to timelines.
So is it they don't understand what we do, our process, or what we do here, especially with swing bed, or, but I thought that was one of the things that they wanted, was to be able to have that access.
Those are both true statements.
Okay.
It is something that is very, very interesting to them. They see great benefit for it, but it's something they know nothing about. It's
So
not
they don't know
learned,
how it's
so
gonna
they're-
work for
they're
them.
learning. That's what they're learning. That's what they're spending their time
Okay.
understanding right now. So and they continue to invest. So I hear your questions because they're the questions that we ask
Yeah, we
all the
understand.
time. But, so I continue to see investment being made, so they have hired a consultant who is deeply engaged in, for them to understand what a cost report settlement looks like. She's the principal for DZA, which is the major competitor, collaborator, whatever you want to say, to
Competitor.
Whitley.
Competitor.
To Whitley. So they wisely chose somebody who wasn't our own cost report
Mhm.
preparer, so that they could have an outside opinion.
Will we be able to get that, or is that
And
all?
we just got it
confidential?
today.
We just got it today.
So we're still digesting it, and I felt like, I just glanced at it, but it didn't even seem like it was all of the details.
Can we get a confidential copy of that, or take a look at it at some point?
I asked for that today, and they were going to seek permission from DZA to share it with us.
Okay.
That was this morning.
Yeah,
They don't have it this
I
afternoon.
got the cost report
Yeah.
itself, and then we'll factor it into our performance through May, because it's very detailed level, of, you know, exactly what your Medicare payment should have been. And it'll take us a while, but we'll have it done in a week or so.
Their cost report?
No.
That's what I want to.
There being the cost report the DZA did on us
Yeah.
to provide to overlay.
Right.
So it's on us, and we gave DZA all the
Okay.
information they needed. So they got the
Okay.
information directly from us to prepare the cost report.
Okay.
And David, you know that we have a cost report test done.
Right.
This is a more granular test. In fact, it is a cost report. So it's pretty much exact what we looked like through May. So it takes some of the estimates out. We will factor that in, and within a week or so have that. What does that mean? What does it look like?
Okay,
Okay.
so will I be able to see it at some point?
You'll be able to see, I mean, yeah, I mean, you can see the cost report, it'll be mind-numbing detail, but you'll see the effect on our financials, what our financial performance looks like, almost exactly through May.
Okay.
Yeah, that's interested in, and that's what they're interested in too.
The piece that they're really wanting to keep protected is their documents. So that's
Mhm.
why coming into these meetings, we can bring summaries,
Mhm.
but we can't bring their documents. That's the piece that the non-disclosure agreement was, they're very sensitive about.
So what documents are they talking about? when
Any
you say that?
documents they share with us. So
Thanks.
they're not public.
I realize that. So-
I'm sorry I'm asking so many questions,
No,
but I
that's
think
what
No,
this
go
is
ahead.
for.
Please.
That's what this time's for.
I just want to make sure that
No,
everybody else
these are-
gets their questions in too, if they have some, but I thought that these are really important.
Their documents are listed here. The item description describes what we're asking for on this display,
Now,
which we'll go through.
Now, are they not a nonprofit? Yes, that's what I thought, okay.
They are a nonprofit, and they call themselves a profit-driven nonprofit, if you can figure
Not-for-profit.
that out. But they are a nonprofit, meeting the
That's
law
what
under
I've seen
nonprofit.
before on
They're
the
a
documents that
not-for-profit
they
organization,
submit,
501c3.
because you can get it offline.
501c3.
So you can get their audited financials.
Yeah.
But, you know, as you can see here, we've asked for really some insider pieces of information. Meeting minutes, strategic plans, policies.
Skip,
did
do you
they
have
allow-
any comments about some of the questions I've been asking about how you feel, whether they're acting in good faith through the process as you're going along and reviewing, or?
Yeah, I've been reviewing some documents. I think they're responding in good faith. It's a process to try and pull pieces together, put it all together, get it to a secure site, download it, look at it, review it. So it's, it's this kind of mating dance that's occurring, and it takes a while. So I don't have any, specific concerns. I think raising that question is, are we getting closer? Are we getting closer? And I think it's, the old adage that the squeaky wheel is going to get some grease. And so I think Dr. Wickoff and the CFO are working with them to try and move that along.
Okay.
But you as a board, it's okay for you to be impatient. And
Well,
it's okay.
I'm concerned.
You made the
That's all.
comment, the CEO would go back and tell them, the board's concerned about, meetings and timelines. I do not see any red flags. There's
Okay.
nothing nefarious, there's nothing being hid.
Okay.
There's a lot of detail that's coming and it's forthcoming.
Okay.
It's,
We're on the level playing field, right? There's no.
We're not.
No,
No, we're not.
So we are secondary.
No.
That's what I'm concerned about, because we're
We've been
small.
moving up as much as possible with our consultants and our legal consultant.
And financially, they're very different.
Yeah, that's
Very
finance,
different.
what you know, and they're the ones who have the cash and we don't, so they're the ones who we're looking for
That
their
doesn't mean they
brand.
cannot treat us fairly as well.
Oh,
just because
oh,
we're-
please, I really feel like I need to jump in because this is
Yeah.
all being recorded, and I really feel like it's very important to declare that there has been no experiences where we have felt unrespected, that there has been evidence that they're not playing fair, that they're not enthusiastic, none of that. In fact, when we call out, when we say, we don't understand why it's taking so long to get information, they will share in our, I'm discouraged too, I'm sorry, it's some of the people that we've assigned to do it, we will go and work on that, and they'll offer exposure to some internal challenges, I need to talk to that person, they're irritating me too. I mean, that type of internal exposure.
This is new for them with a public
Never
entity
done
too.
this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is the
Never
first.
That
done
makes a
this.
big
That
difference.
makes a big
And they
difference.
really are just so bothered, so concerned about the Public Records Act. So they're really just super cautious and they're learning every step of the way. So, and I completely share where you are saying, well, we have a timeline, and so those are the responses that we give on the phone calls that I have with them. So I talk to Jonathan, my counterpart there, every 2 weeks. We're on the phone together, more often if we need to. But that's where we feed back. That
Okay.
they're.
Okay, well, I feel better.
Okay.
And remember, this is a pretty aggressive timeline that you all put together
It
early
is.
on. When you look at it, it should be more 18 to 24 months, and everybody said, let's compress it. When you do that, compresses all the other requirements. Stuff
Okay.
takes long.
And I wouldn't be surprised, they're a nonprofit that's profitable, they do good business, they're probably the closest to us, but they're transparent, they are even on the internet, their financials are there, there's a lot of stuff that's different than what we had last time we went through this process, it's entirely different.
This is much, much different.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Much different.
And we have to embrace that and realize that.
Right.
Yes,
It's all
much
on its
different.
way. And probably the one other thing that we haven't talked about is thinking about their bandwidth. They're in the process of a major
Huge
construction
renovation.
project.
I've seen that.
And we remember being in that place, and that consumes quite a lot of your bandwidth. And so while it's not an excuse, it's just something I realize is a truth.
Yeah, yeah.
I think they were in the second phase or third phase, or third. I know.
Honestly, I don't know. When I drive by, I see that it's a little bigger and a little bigger.
Yeah.
Has another crane.
Right.
Whether the east wing or the something. Maternal child.
But do you have more questions, David?
No, those satisfy my curiosity.
Yes, other questions? Because I feel like this is really what this is for.
I've been
To give you the legal analogy, you do exchange of interrogatories and requests for production, and we've done that. And then if people are lagging a little bit because there's a deadline, then you do a discovery conference, CR26I. And so now we're going to have this little discovery conference, we're going to have a conversation, and then they'll get back on track and reset and recalibrate. You do it all the time when you do this. Now, I don't have them done yet, why not? They're hard, they're long, and they're complicated.
I tend to get money from opposing counsel when they drag their heels too much.
Yeah.
And all these times.
And motions to compel.
Mm.
All right, well, we're not right there yet.
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
No.
So,
Awesome. And you guys was ready to let Steve start walking you through what he identified on his assessments
Okay.
of the documents that are available.
Okay. You have this, and Kim says of the documents that are available, it's really of the documents I have
Sorry.
had time to go through. If there's nothing there, it doesn't mean the document is available, it means it, go through it, and we will. The first is a number, we have numbered them just for reference. And then a description of what they are. And then, okay, who's the reviewer? It's most likely Kim, myself, Jim Baldoff, our controller,
And
and our
Skip.
HR
It might have
manager,
been.
and Skip. So, yeah. And then reviewer comments, just a short summary. Does the reviewer need to review this? Does someone else to look at it?
Rachel Slipka?
Yeah, she's our HR manager.
Okay.
And then additional information request. If we have to say, over like, I want something else, a clarification or something.
Okay.
And then the reviewers, what did the reviewer conclude? You know, what's their indication? So, go down, you see 2.2. Do you have any, the question is, do you have any other merger and acquisition strategic discussions underway? They have no, what we got was that no documents to disclose, in part based on confidentiality issues and concerns of counsel for overlay. So I want a clarification of that. What does that mean? You know, why did you make this statement? So I couldn't really make any conclusion on this. So I've asked for more information. The next one is on page 4, the strategic plans for overlay. And look at their strategic plan. It's in
3.3.
place.
What page?
Page 4. Page
Four.
4. Page 4.
Yeah.
Did move up.
3.23 is the item number.
Yeah, 3.2.
Excuse me. And the strategic plan does support the affiliation with the hospital, and an affiliation such as this, as I read it. No, I don't really need to refer to anybody else, no additional requests, and the plan indicates a strategic fit with SVH and a strategic fit with our community. So I went through it. The next one is 4.1.1, again on page 4. And basically they're filed tax returns. They're not for profit, but they have to file what's called a Form 990.
Yeah.
And it was filed on time, accurately, and the review of the form did not bring out any additional concerns on the 990. And so there were no additional concerns on this one. Then right below it, 4.1.2, a look at the ongoing audits or investigations. And the only current audit being undertaken is the Washington State Department of Revenue excise tax audit on their medical clinics. It's pretty standard stuff. And there are didn't ask anybody else to weigh in, no concerns, and it's a routine audit that they're having done. We've had such audits done. There are no issues with that. Next one, page 5,
4.2.2.
4.2.1. 2, excuse me, 2. Do they have any contingent obligations? In other words, financial obligations that are dependent on something outside occurring, in excess of $1 million. In other words, the potential would be $1 million. There are no contingent obligations over $1 million, so there are no concerns on this. The next one is on page 6. 6.1, and Attorney Hauser reviewed this. And Skip, you want to talk about it?
Well, we were asking for a list or description of a government third-party payor in excess of 250,000. And so they identified that, and requested a list, and they don't have any. And they have not been and or not currently operating under a corporate integrity agreement. So neither one of these applied, and there's no issues of concern. So we asked for the last 3 years of any subpoena or civil investigation demands.
And there's no subpoenas or civil investigation?
Well, not pertaining to this section. You know, there might be some potential litigation up there that we'll look at further. But none in place are currently being negotiated that pertain to a third-party payor. So that's specific to this.
Okay.
Next one is, again, 6.2 on page 7. You want to take it?
Yeah, sure. This one also is, that has overlay made any affiliates or evaluated made to CMS, OIG, Office of Inspector General, Department of Justice, any other governmental agencies in 3 years. This would raise a lot of red flags. And under 6.2, no response was provided by overlay nor any further description. So we need a little bit more information on that. We don't know any yet, but we need further clarification on that. Please provide a list of any material internal compliance investigations conducted. They identify they conduct their own coding audits, various topics. They've complied with all that. They identify in 2016, they undertook an in-depth review of the physician financial relationships, found no findings, material non-compliance. So they follow the standard practice, what we call best practice or standard prudent, reasonable approach. So again, no issues there. The thing we just need to look for under 6.2 is if there's any other description there. I think we may have some of that. But at the time I reviewed this, and I reviewed this quite a while ago now, it wasn't available yet. But there's still pieces coming in. So the pieces I reviewed, some of it came in and some of it came
So you're not done with that, actually?
Right.
in. Not complete, correct.
6.3, any internal compliance investigations that have been conducted in the last 3 years. Look identified, they conduct coding audits, which is very good business practice. We do the same thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that they took an in-depth review of their physician financial relationships, and there were no findings, no material findings on either of those. Those are both very prudent business practices, and there were no issues of concern raised in this area. 6.4, we asked for their documents outlining their corporate compliance plan and policies. And I reviewed that, the code of conduct, the compliance program, conflict of interest, policy, and their organizational ethics. And their plan was very robust and appears to be well administered, and there are no issues of concern. So, next page, we have 7.7. Any evidence of non-compliance with federal and state laws, and there are no known they respond to no known documents referencing any non-compliance by Overlake Lake with any applicable federal and state laws and regulations concerning the employee-employer relationship, and with all agreements relating to the employment of employees. So there are no issues there. And then next page, 8.1.
Real clear, no pending, contemplated, or threatened changes in any of their licenses, permits, or accreditations, which is a good thing. I mean, they're not under investigation, there's nothing pending, there's no concerns, which is important.
9.1, there was no response, and we kind of requested clarification why on that.
I mean, it's not uncommon for hospitals, as you know, to be threatened with lawsuits, and so some of this might be somewhat confidential or attorney-client kind of communication, but still, I think we asked if it's over $1 million, and they almost always are, issues about insurability, meaning are they going to exceed their policy limits? They'll provide this, just probably take them off, and then we'll fair it.
Yeah.
Well, we could look at the Department of Health for any kind of settlements and or,
Right. I did a little bit of research and found some. I didn't put it in here because it's not all been verified, but yeah, they've had lawsuits in the past. Every hospital has it. I know.
Here's the
They've had
perfect
several
one.
ones. Yeah.
anything most recent.
Nothing that I can find recent. It's all more than 3 years old.
Can I just ask, it just might be a formatting question. On some of the, on all the prior ones, if there were no additional requests and no referral to another reviewer, then it says there are no issues of concern in this area. The past couple haven't had that. I feel like when you
That
say
was
that, you're like,
probably
we're
a
done
me.
so. Is that just, you're gonna go back and fix
I'm gonna go
this?
back and fix
We're
that.
done so? Okay.
Yes.
That's
I
why,
saw
is
that.
that what
Yes,
they did?
yes, that was a me.
Okay, no, I figured, that's fine. I just know that you'll feel better when that's filled in.
Yes,
Right.
yes. And that's, you know, what we are. There are, as you can see, a number of items that we
Yeah.
will continue to review. And we are getting more items as we speak in from them. And, you know, Kim referenced, they're busy and, you know, they're building a tower, but also you gotta realize they staff for continuing operations. They didn't have a staff sitting around going, I have nothing to do, I wish we'd affiliated with somebody. So it's a workload on current staff, just like it is with us, and it takes some time. But we will get what we have requested, and we will give you a complete report of what we find.
Like we did it.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. I was talking to Kim, I said, you know, we've been doing this stuff, let's poke them a little bit.
We did it, so they can
Yeah.
do it.
Yes.
So how likely will we have the remainder of the diligence items to review?
You mean,
By next month, the time we come together again. I think that by next month, we will have a huge majority of it, if not all of it, ready to go.
you'll have more. Man, they'll probably won't, I'm not gonna promise all, to be honest.
So the draft agreement, they meet this month, so. When do they meet?
Their board, I don't think will actually even see it this month. I think that their board delegates it to Mike Marsh and team to put together. So I don't think their board will see it until it's ready for signature. Their subcommittees will see it, their finance and strategy committees will see it earlier, it was their plan, and this is just as they've shared with me.
So they won't be looking at a draft, their board, they'll be looking at a plan.
Probably their finance and strategy committee will look at the drafts.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when is their fiscal year end? Is their fiscal year
June
June?
30th.
So it's June. So
June
they
30th,
just
yeah.
finished their fiscal year. Okay.
Yeah, which was also part of the slow start, is because they
That
were.
makes sense.
They were actively engaged in getting their budget finalized when we started this process in the April-May timeframe.
It's close to the end.
Mhm.
Yeah. One of their executives got married in the middle of all of this. He's a crucial part of the team for information, so.
Took a
that's
long
done.
honeymoon before coming back to
Yeah,
all this.
it's over with, and he's back and going.
They gotta look at their employment agreements, where they're gonna allow that, you know, marriages.
Yeah.
I think they continue to
Prohibited
learn.
during this season.
So that was kind of a lot to digest, and because we can't send it to you ahead of time for you to read, you have to kind of, a lot of the trust you're giving to us to do the reviewing. But does the way that it's designed make sense? Do you have questions about any of the things that we've looked at so far on here? Any of the things that Steve or Skip shared?
I had the follow-up questions that I did, so, you know, if there's something else that comes up, I'm sure
Okay.
we can talk to you. But
Yeah, absolutely. Jean, you look like you might be thinking something.
Thank you.
Okay?
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Well, we would value your feedback if you feel like there's a different way to display the information or different languages to use in, again, finishing the boxes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
No, I
Yeah.
think that's fine.
The next time around, there'll be some ways that we'll add to indicate what we've already looked at.
Yeah,
So
that'd
that we
be
don't
fine.
find
Like
ourselves
a big
looking it over again. A big check mark.
Yeah.
Do you, sometimes after one person reviews it, does another person review it? Do you compare notes?
Yeah, absolutely. So you'll see there's a column that talks about referring to another reviewer.
Okay.
There's a couple of things that both Steve and I lay eyes on.
Okay.
And then on the financial information, I will review it and our controller will review it. So we have two brains on that.
So you
one,
have
too.
Jim then doing it too?
Jim will look at it,
Okay,
too.
that's
Yeah.
good to know.
Yeah.
And it would be nice if his name were down here too, so that we know that he's.
It's on some.
It's on some.
It's on some.
Okay, then I just didn't notice
Yeah.
it. Because he's trying to read the other stuff.
We've been talking about the definitive agreement already, but just to go ahead and jump onto that, we do know that it is being worked up on. It hasn't had a lot of progress made on it because they have been distracted trying to understand our financials, trying to understand swing bed to inform what needs to go on the definitive agreement. But in conversations today, they're ready to jump back in and start putting contributions towards the definitive agreement. So my hope is that we'll see something, a draft just for first review, and maybe not even for review, just first look, maybe in the next, I hope, 2 to 3 weeks. Again, to be consistent with the timeline. So this is an opportunity to follow up on the question that Commissioner Pollard raised, and that's around RCW 7044-240, which, just as a reminder, that's the one that talks about when a public hospital district has a collaborative activity with another organization and creates a new entity in the process, representation on the leader, on the board. And so we talked about that as a group the last time, I think the time before, and we have, so Skip has been involved, and Brian has been involved, and several of Brian's colleagues, and we have brought MRSC into it as well. Everybody's interpretation of it is, it says what it says, and there's not really been an application of it along the way other than what it says. Their responses will be, yes, you may have representatives on the board, but no one will come and interpret that says it absolutely must, or there's a reason for you to not. So I don't think that it's a resolved question, because every person that we involve in trying to figure it out, does this apply to us, or how does this apply to us, they find themselves saying, oh, I can kind of see how the language doesn't actually tell you what is the right way or the obligatory way to go. So it's not yet resolved.
I wish you had provided us with the RCW so we could look at it.
Here, I've
Yeah,
got it.
yeah.
Sorry.
I've got it.
Oh, he's ready for us.
We'll dissect it.
Is there any other entity or any other entities that have done this? And-
Yes.
Okay.
There
so-
is, and so what we did was Stevens Hospital and Swedish, do I have alternating? Stevens Hospital and Swedish, when that transaction occurred, is that very, very similar to what we're doing. They did a lease operating agreement, which is, and Emma and I talked about this a lot at the retreat. So they did a lease operating agreement, which is what we're embarking on. And what Swedish Edmunds did was they created called a strategic collaboration committee. And that strategic collaboration committee was formed with the intent, its charter was to make sure that the interest, rights, and property of both groups continue to be protected, respected, and fulfilled throughout the course of the collaboration and the agreement. And so it was launched at the beginning and perpetuated, and I think it continues to this day because they continue to have that, they still operate under that lease operating agreement. So we are in the process of reaching out to the, to Swedish admins to understand a little more and to get whatever documents that they have. Just to see more, because that may actually end up being a more suitable solution for us anyway, because it really feels like it gets you action right at the heart of the matter. But that's kind of what I wanted to throw out to you all, is to ask the question, what would you like to see as the outcome of being able to make sure interests are protected, property is overseen, all of those things that
So who
their
selects-
strategic committee
So who
does.
selects this other entity, and who qualifies them?
That committee that I
The
referred
committee you're
to,
referring to.
that's why I have a call out to try and understand how to just launch it, and who continues to sit on the committee.
You have to have a balance there, I don't know how it's made up.
Yeah, so I don't know any of those details. I know that it exists and what its charter purpose is, but to really understand. So my hope is that I'll be able to see like an agenda, see if they're willing to share an agenda from it, and how they go through the process of identifying who's on
Very
it.
qualifying.
And how
People
they-
that are seating on it.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So how many from each entity is there and how, okay. And who has authority and who doesn't? Do they as a unit have authority or not?
Those are all questions that we'll be asking. But yes, but they call it a committee, committee of the two representative facilities or organizations.
I got a copy of that, you need to find one agreement. That's
Do
one
you?
point.
See, I thought
Someone I know.
I thought we did too, and I can't find it. I can't find it
Can
in
you
the
find
files
yours,
I had
David?
access to.
Check. Howard's emails.
Aha.
Howard, huh?
It doesn't surprise me.
So what Dr. Wickoff has been talking about was one of the core needs when they put together, and she found, and this is on their website, the Stevens Hospital Affiliation Overview. This was from 2010. And what they stated was a goal and a core need to create a joint committee to ensure successful collaboration between the hospital and the district. And they achieved that, and they call it a strategic collaboration committee. But I spend hours on their website looking at financial statements and others, and I just can't find what I'm really looking for. But they have an enormous amount of information on their website. If you can't sleep, you can spend hours and hours
This is
on
what
it.
Swedish
Yeah,
Swedish Edmonds,
and I can send you the link.
or
on that.
Stevens?
It is
So
now
it's
called
on the
Verdant.
Verdant site.
Verdant.
The Verdant.
Verdant.
The
Verdant.
site.
Which is,
Oh.
It's the Verdant, you
Yeah.
spoke with one of them.
Okay, here's
Yeah.
one that came out in 2011 after they changed their name. This was called Verdant Community Leading Meetings, and they go through that. And they even put on the front page the definition of Verdant.
Yeah.
Adjective, green or lush, a oasis. So they've got a lot more information, and then they talked about hospital impacts, the priorities, and the cores. A lot of
Can I
information.
look at that?
Yeah, you can have that, in fact, if you'd like.
yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
About 2/3 of the way down, it talks about, if a hospital district gets into a contract to join or another party, et cetera. It says, such legal entity shall include representatives of the public hospital district, which representatives may include members of the public hospital district's board of commissioners. If it's not the hospital board of commissioners, then who would represent the public hospital district?
That's what, we have all those same questions.
Yeah.
That's why I say, as you really start trying to make it, to operationalize the RCW, now it's like, it doesn't give us a whole lot of guidance.
The initial answer,
Somewhat open.
I could tell you, is it would be someone who resides in the district.
Community? Yeah.
It would have to be an individual called an elector or a resident who resides in the district.
Well, that's what we need to clarify, because can it be anybody then who resides in the district?
Yeah, 'cause it
doesn't
have to be
It
Qualifications?
doesn't
or
say
any-
it, Commissioner.
Doesn't, it can be, but it doesn't have to be, it doesn't say that. So we're getting lots of information, so let me give you this email. This one is a little bit cryptic, but I think it answers your question in the second part of this email, which is interesting. I was hoping it would be answered in the first, but it gets answered in the second. And so this is an email that came from Oscar Ray, and I think he knows you, Commissioner Pollard, actually.
Yes, actually, when we call MRSC,
Uh-huh.
he's the go-to person for public hospital districts.
He's now been assigned Public Hospital District questions. He's been there about a year and a half. He's a city attorney, came out of Kennewick.
And he was also at Chelan and made a
Yeah,
presentation.
we met,
He
yeah.
Yeah,
did,
we were
he
there.
did.
I understand it was a long line to talk to him as well, so I wasn't there. This is his response on July 8th after we'd gone back and forth. I've worked with 2 other legal consultants there. I think I finally got the closest source I can get, and that is Oscar. So what he says is RCW 7044-240, that's the one I just handed out, applies where a PhD contracts or joins with another entity to provide hospital health care. In so doing, the PhD and the other entity may do so through establishing a separate legal entity. If a separate legal entity is established, then the governing body shall include. So that answers your questions. If you create another entity, it then shall include representatives. But it doesn't have to include the commissioners, that's the may.
That's right.
But here's the definitive answer, it's in the second paragraph. The provisions of the RCW 7044-240 would not apply if a PhD decides to lease the real property. Because you're not entering into a contract, you're not entering into a joint venture that is not presently required for PhD purposes. So leasing PhD real property would fall under the next statute, and I attached it for you. PhD in that situation is a lessor, the landlord, and not a participant in a joint undertaking. So there would not be a need for representation on the other entity's board, the new board. And then he goes on to say under RCW 7044.310, I've also attached that, I gave you 3 statutes, 3 RCWs. The PhD in that situation needs to adopt a resolution stating the property is not presently required for PhD purposes. But that appears to be the only specific prerequisite to lease your property. You're not surplusing your property, you're not selling it. That's why I gave you both those statutes, so you'd be real clear. The first one is the contract. The second RCW says if you're going to sell your property, surplus, you have to say it has no current or future use. And it's the last RCW I gave you, and that one's only, 2 sentences long. Board of Commissioners of any public hospital may lease or rent out real property in the district, which the board has determined by resolution presently is not required for public hospital district purposes, in such manner and upon such terms and conditions as the board in its discretion finds to be in the best interest of the district. In fact, it's only 1 sentence long and 3 lines long.
But this has to do with real property, and what we're doing is entering into an agreement for operations.
This is leasing or renting out real property. You would
Yeah,
be
it's real
leasing,
property.
you
Or
would be
leasing,
leasing real
yeah.
property. This building is sitting on dirt, that is real property. It is real property.
And it's
But
being
not
leased by
personal.
Our
overlay.
relationship would be a operations.
Say that part again, I'm sorry.
No.
Our relationship would be that Overlake would take over operations.
They're going to.
And so it's not an issue of selling or leasing property as I see it.
Aren't they leasing it to operate it?
They're going to lease the
Yeah.
building and all the
Yeah.
equipment to
Lease and
operate.
operate, yeah.
We're not going to have an arrangement with them to operate.
So
You're not going to tell them how to operate it. You're just going to say, here's the building, here's the equipment,
Yes, this month.
pay us a certain amount of money each month.
so
But-
they could open up a Walmart in it if they wanted.
Well, they couldn't actually.
Probably.
Zoning won't allow it, but.
Yeah.
They'd have to get a variance in the zone.
Yeah, that's true. Zoning, as long as it complied with zoning, they could do
Correct.
what they wanted with the facility.
Well, we-
That was kind of a
You,
goofy.
and when you get the definitive agreement, you're going to talk
Yeah.
about how this,
Yeah,
what you expect from them in terms of
In fact,
service.
the LOI already has
We
that.
can require representatives from our community to be on that collaborative committee, right?
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
that's part of why I
It's
wanted
not
to
a
bring
big
it up
deal.
for conversation, is to really understand what is it that we want to happen,
Somebody
because
from
we
our
want to
district, the
encourage
district
that.
that cares about our healthcare system could be on the,
Okay, so you like the idea of that collaborative
yeah, I
committee?
think that's good, but just to make sure that we have somebody that is watching out for our
Right.
For the-
healthcare
for
interests
the-
of our
It's
Right,
somewhat-
taxpayer dollars and what's
It's
going
somewhat
on, what we've
akin
already
to-
invested.
I think the default position should be that it should be a commissioner or two.
They won't do that, I guarantee you.
Well, they might, only because of this. Think of this as your board and you have committees. So they're gonna have their board in this new entity. That's the Board of Trustees is what they're gonna be called.
I don't think you can serve on both.
You could then have a committee underneath that, just like you have committees. You have numerous committees and you allow citizens, and you remember in your bylaws, allow for citizens to be appointed to your committees. So I think when you start getting to the definitive agreement and some of those finer details, you can say, we'd like to have a committee, strategic collaboration, going forward committee, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes that verbiage becomes important. When I did this with fire districts, they did not want to call them merger committees because they hated the word merger. So they called them a thinking forward committee. So that was the name of these committees, the thinking forward committees.
But Skip, this RCW that you
Mhm.
gave us and we referred to before, is
Mhm.
70-44-240.
Right.
And it does say, the governing body of such legal entity shall include representatives of the public hospital district, which
Yes.
may include
commissioners.
members of the
I
board of
understand.
commissioners.
But that pertains to the board of the new entity, which you can't serve on.
Yeah.
That's that statute, that's according to Oscar, he said, it would not apply
You
if
got a
you're just
conflict of
leasing the
interest
property.
Potentially, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna be serving in both different
Yeah.
boards.
But I think your default position is not necessarily an inappropriate one, where you said, look, who knows the district better than a commissioner, potentially?
Exactly.
Then, a citizen is an elector, you live in the district, and you could appoint a commissioner to that committee. Again, Dr. Whitcup and I are gonna try and delve a little bit more into Verdant and see what they did, see who they appointed, who they used on those committees. How does that committee work, and how often do they meet, what do they achieve? And it's nice that we can see something that's been successful. I looked at their Moss Adams financials, and they're successful, they're doing well. So-
Well, they got $1 million out of Swedish.
Right.
They-
Oh, more, they got a whole lot out of it.
How about a lot more than that?
They got a
We're
whole lot
getting
more.
not
More than
one
that,
dime
Gene.
in cash out of overlay,
More
not
than
one
that,
dime.
So, yeah, I think there's a lot of unanswered questions, but Dr. Whitcutt's on the right track, and I was not aware of this. And they call it an affiliation too. Remember, we had this long discussion about whether we should really be calling this a transaction and not an affiliation. I think they struggled with the same thing, and they came up with the same word. They call it an affiliation. But yeah, if you really have some time, you can go in and read the Moss Adams financial report. And they have pages and pages about management's discussion and analysis. I guess I've normally not seen accountants take that much time to go through the transition of operations. They go all the way back to 2010. They go all the way back to negotiated agreements prior to that for 30 years. So a lot of history and a lot of background there.
You know, when you rent or lease a property, there's often a requirement for a deposit. I'd like to see
Not
some money
necessarily.
out of overlay. Not always,
Not
but
necessarily.
That's what I thought would be a good idea.
You don't have to
First and
accept the
last?
deposit.
Why not?
That's the whole property that you rent.
Yeah, first and last.
Good landlords, after they've had a bad experience, realize they didn't have enough deposit or deposit.
Mhm.
At all.
Yeah.
I've been there and done that. I rented to some college kids who my son knew, right?
That was bad right after that.
But so in this case, we don't have college kids and we have a little, a little better financials, but it might be something when you get to the due diligence about.
I think we should look at that.
I wrote it down.
What?
I wrote it down.
Thank you.
The deposit?
I keep track of all your
Non-refund-
ideas.
Non-refundable.
They may not all find their way in, but I
Non-refundable.
grabbed them.
Those are pet
They missed
deposits.
their,
that are not
their insurance payment and part of the building burns down. They don't get reimbursed for it, so now we've got a burned up building,
Exactly.
You're gonna have to carry insurance on
Yeah.
it.
You- and
Well,
you
what if they
actually-
miss it?
Now, you will have to carry insurance as well.
David, you actually brought that up.
Yeah, but they'll have to cover, they'll have to have fire insurance and other things like that.
They do.
First party coverage.
And we'll be second party coverage.
And we'll be named as in their policy.
Additional name insurance.
Yeah,
Okay,
additional
okay, that
needs,
works.
uh-huh.
We'll do that.
Additional name.
We're really getting into the weeds. I apologize, Dr. Whitcomb, that was my fault.
That's all right.
I won't do it
We're
again.
doing fine on time tonight.
That's what we were
This is all good.
intended to do,
That's
get into the
exactly
weeds
right.
of these meetings.
That's
Is
what
that
this
not
is
correct?
for, to ask questions from, yeah.
So long as we don't get lost.
We don't want to get lost in the
You'll get
weeds.
lost in the weeds, yeah.
We got tall people, so we're good.
Actually, that's easy for us to do sometimes.
Find you there. All right, I'm gonna take us on, just so that we are
Yes.
honest to the whole agenda. So the trust is our next topic. We already
That's on
reviewed
my
what our
agenda.
thoughts were on the trust on here. But on our July 31 non-affiliation work study, so we have 2 work studies a month. And so the one that we don't associate with our affiliation. So this month, we'll be talking about the post-transaction budget. So I'm bringing that up under trust because what we come up with in our conversation around the post-transaction budget and how much money that the group feels like they need to have in order to do activities, that's gonna inform, it's gonna loop back and inform how much goes in the trust. You know, they actually play against one another. So that's the reason why I'm bringing it up here. So that's on the 31st of this month. So Steve has a budget to present to you. He and Keith have been putting a fair amount of time into that. So just, it'll bring the dollars to real dollars.
Okay.
The land and building leases, the lease transferences, those are all, those things, those happen later, so they're all in pending status. And then the certificate of need box, again, there's no action on there, but just to come back to a question that we had brought up in prior meetings. The question had been brought up about what is the start point for the Attorney General's review? Because that legislation just passed this session. And so any transactions like ours that occur after January 1st have to be referred for the Attorney General review. So we were asking ourselves the question, what's the trigger for that? Is it us signing our definitive agreement, or is it the certificate of need process finalizing? And so we went back and forth, and so the thought was, well, could we just ask the Attorney General for an opinion, since we will possibly be the first to go through this? And we do not have the right to ask the Attorney General for an opinion. Only somebody who's been elected to statewide office can ask the question, somebody who's head of a state agency can ask, or a county prosecuting attorney. Those are the 3 folks who have the access to ask the Attorney General
Local
for an
legislator,
opinion.
can we talk to
Not the
them?
That would be the only way,
Statewide
is
office.
if any of you have the ear of a
Why
state
don't we
elected
do that?
official.
I guess what I'm wondering, why haven't we done that?
Because we haven't had this meeting to see if that's how the group wants to go forward, because you as elected officials, it would be done under your name, so not wanting to move forward to
It's a
speak
critical piece of
for you.
information, and we need it, so however you can get it, let's
Yeah.
get it.
It's probably not all that critical, it just means it's either one more step, or it's a step we don't have to do. But it shouldn't be a barrier.
Does someone have access to?
Statewide, yeah, we can.
To the
State
state
elected.
officials?
Yeah, just like our Secretary of State, Kim Wyman.
That it's a friend of yours?
Yeah, I could ask her.
I could also ask Bill Ramos or Lisa Cowan.
It is not
state
statewide.
legislators.
It doesn't have to be statewide, it's a
That's not
legislator.
the-
What do you mean, is it
Oh,
state
State
legislators?
legislators, what do you
I
mean
thought
by
it was
state
statewide.
Okay, so it's
Okay,
state
I thought somebody-
Or local would be best, because they
Yeah.
would have an interest in what
I
we're
think
doing.
so.
Oh, I see.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I thought it was-
legislator, senator,
yeah.
or
Okay,
representative.
I
can
thought they have to be a
request
statewide official.
it. Meaning a state elected
A
official,
state
meaning they
elected.
serve at the state level.
I'd be happy to facilitate that if you want.
That group?
No, go
If the
ahead.
group
Yeah.
is okay, is that okay
Yeah.
with you
And talk
guys?
to Bill.
So what would be helpful is that you work through Dr. Wickoff to craft the question, because the question and how it's crafted becomes very important. That's what gets submitted to the Attorney General. And then the AG decides whether they're going to do an opinion or an informal opinion. An opinion, AGO, is published, and the document is sent all over. If they get that question, they think it's not deserving of an Attorney General opinion, publish one, they'll do an informal opinion, which they'll send back to you. Now, those informal opinions are not necessarily as binding, but my experience has been everybody conforms to them and follows them. It's just that they didn't want to take the time to do an official opinion that gets published on their website. So I think it's just important how you phrase the question, what do you exactly want to know? And legislatures, with all due respect, sometimes they get a little confused and they start asking these big, long questions, and they might be getting an answer they don't want.
So you guys are okay, so we'll work with Jen to use her contact.
Who's gonna write the question?
We'll do it.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. Bill's on vacation right now, with Louise.
All right, so just to finish out, and we've already actually talked about this, but this was last month's timeline. Just wanted, again, keep the information flowing forward. And then this is today's timeline. And no changes on here, other than I said the trust agreement is probably not on track because it's July and that work has just begun. Just today begun, even though we had the conversation, the actual pen to paper. Again, just keeping us all accountable to the timeline, like David started us out with. Accountability. I think I think that's where we have leverage,
Okay,
is shared accountability.
yeah.
Any other questions for me or
Some
Steve?
good things we've
or-
come up with today.
There are, absolutely.
There are things that we can do, and we're gonna do them, so that's good.
I'll give it back to you. On the agenda.
Where's my agenda?
Are you ready for wrap up?
Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions? Any board member? Does somebody want to make a motion to end this meeting?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll put it to vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, we are adjourned.
Okay.